So I hope everybody had good parallel sessions this afternoon and also enjoyed that keynote conversation earlier. And we are now moving into a final session of the day, and it is entitled Moving from Reflection to Action. And the idea is to synthesize today's key messages together with a great panel who are also already in position, and also with you, ladies and gentlemen. And a bit later on, we are definitely looking for your participation. We're going to do all of this as a team, so it is my pleasure now to introduce my co-moderator in this session. He is Andrew Norton. He's director of the International Institute for Environment and Development and formerly director of research at the Overseas Development Institute. And he is going to be moderating the discussion up here on the stage while I come down in the audience and interact with you. And I'm going to say just a bit more about that format in a second, but first I'm going to let Andrew introduce our very esteemed panel. So take it away.
Thank you very much indeed, Melinda. As Melinda was indicating, the purpose here is to have an interactive discussion, and we'll move to that as quickly as we can, and to take up themes from the 4 discussion channels that we've had through the day, as we've seen outlined. And I think if there's one thing overall, we were just chatting before, we're looking for concrete actions towards transformative change in these areas, as that's like the top line that we want to get from this discussion, moving towards action from the deliberations today. So thanks very much indeed to Melinda, and let me introduce the panel now before we proceed with the discussion as a whole and start with some comments on the day so far. Delighted to welcome Karolina Skog, the Minister of Environment from Sweden. I'm just going to do brief introductions at this point. Also delighted to introduce the Deputy Minister of Environment from the Republic of Korea, Mr. Min-ho Lee. Frank Rijsbermann, the Director of the Global Green Growth Institute, also based in Korea in Seoul. Klaus Milke, who is Chairman of the Board of Greenwatch, which is a German NGO, Germanwatch, I'm sorry, apologies. A German NGO focusing on environment and development. Excuse me, there's a confusion with a British organisation there. Thanks. And finally, we were due to have the Minister join us from Senegal. Sadly, he's not able to be with us, so we're delighted to have Amadou Lamine Deanne, Director for Green Investment and Partnership at the Ministry of Environment of Senegal.
And then just a very brief word on our format, because it's a little bit different from what we've had in our other plenaries. As I said, Andrew will now initiate a discussion amongst this very, very eminent panel. And then a little bit later, I am going to come down in the audience, and we're going to be looking for some inputs from you, from your takeaways from the parallel sessions. So I am going to be calling out the different parallel session topics and asking for you to share with us one key message that you took away. So you can already be thinking about that while you listen to the panel, and then I'll be coming down to you a little bit later. So thanks very much, and I wish you a very interesting discussion.
Okay, let me start by asking the panel for one key reflection or takeaway from the discussion today. And can I ask you to start, Minister Skog?
Thank you. Yeah, I was leading the session on lifestyles. The first one I've heard on a page context, and firstly I think it's important to bring that issue on board, being a complex issue, a delicate issue in many terms, specifically on a political level. We need to bring it on. We need to take it on and start talking about it, what we must and mustn't do around that. But because focusing only on the production side can only do so much. We need to engage with citizens and in their lifestyles as well. And the key word from our session, I think, was making the sustainable lifestyles irresistible. That is the key. Not begging or moralizing people, but making that irresistible choice, the sound one, the healthy one, the sustainable one, the easy one. And that is a responsibility for policymakers and leaders, not citizens.
Thank you very much indeed. Deputy Minister Lee.
Thank you. Well, First, let me thank all the speakers for their great ideas this morning and afternoon. As a policymaker, I carefully listened to the government's role suggested by speakers so far. And let me add one additional point to them. As some of you might be aware, Korea has rapid economic growth was largely thanks to government-led policies. Yet, evolving social trends changed this paradigm entirely. You see that some democracy has improved in Korea. So government became smaller, but its role as a coordinator in the government structure got bigger, governance structure bigger. So I would like to emphasize the role of government as a coordinator among different perspectives of various stakeholders, including business, civil organization, academia, and the last but not least, people. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister. Monsieur Deanne.
Je vous remercie. C'est vrai que ce matin, le ministre a présidé un important panel sur les politiques et le leadership pour aller aujourd'hui vers une croissance verte inclusive. Je crois que les débats se sont surtout focalisés sur quel cadre est aujourd'hui le plus pertinent pour impliquer et les États, et les organisations, et les individus. Je crois qu'il y a une question également qui a été posée concernant l'approche, la démarche qui devait être celle de pays en voie de développement ou de pays développés. Et la réponse qui a été apportée est que les pays n'ont qu'à regarder leurs avantages comparatifs pour voir comment aujourd'hui peuvent-ils aller allègrement vers l'économie verte. La question du leadership a été agitée. Je crois que lorsque des questions comme ça sont agitées, il est important qu'un certain nombre d'États, de structures, d'organisations montrent la démarche. C'est vrai que tout le monde ne pourra pas y aller avec la même cadence, mais ceux aujourd'hui qui ont été cités depuis ce matin, on a parlé de l'Allemagne, on a parlé des Émirats arabes unis, et d'un certain nombre de pays qui aujourd'hui, en matière de promotion de l'économie verte, ont fait leur preuve, que cela montre la cadence et que les autres suivent. Voilà.
Merci bien. Frank.
Thank you, Andrew. I was in that same session with the minister. Following up from what Deputy Minister here said from Korea, indeed, the role of government to coordinate, but you emphasize the role to coordinate among multi-stakeholder actions. We also discussed in our panel that possibly, well, a huge step from going from sustainable development, as we have known it for a few decades, to green growth, is that the governments who are champions of green growth now tend not to be only ministers of environment, but tend to work much more across government, so that ministries of finance, ministries of planning, or the Prime Minister's office are involved as well. So I think that is a critical part of, if you like, that coordination role across government also. Then I think my key takeaway of today, whether we are positive like Eric Solheim or negative like Jeff Sachs, frankly, from the countries where the Global Green Growth Institute is working, I would be more with Eric. There's a lot of developing countries who are really committed to green growth, who have nationally committed NDCs, nationally determined contributions to the Paris framework, which are quite ambitious and realistic. And of course, we haven't talked about that so much here, but it's also the market. It's not just whether President Trump makes decisions on clean energy, but if solar is the cheapest form of energy for the countries where we work, then that is going to happen. So I would be more on that positive side, that there is a lot of need for innovation still in areas like ecosystem services, but there are large areas where we see rapid forward movement towards a green economy.
Thank you very much, Frank. And indeed, I think the tension between the optimism and the challenge that the two opening speakers focused on has run through much of the day's discussion. And it's a useful area, I think, for us to focus. Klaus.
Well, I'm very happy to be here in this conference, and I see 3 points, main points, what I learned together with you. I see a tremendous learning curve for all of us, even the developing country, Germany. We challenge the German politicians very often with the phrase Entwicklungsland Deutschland, developing country Germany. That's sometimes very helpful to open the minds what is really happening now on the global scale, that all countries have to move and not only developing countries in the old-fashioned way. And 3 points. One is debate. We had a fruitful debate up to now, and that is so important to speak to each other, to learn from the different perspectives. Transformative cooperation is the second point. I see many opportunities in the room to build on cooperative attitudes and ideas, and also see the challenges in front of us. The third point is multilateralism. It's so important today to do it together and to do it not bilateral or only with one, America first, France first, or whatever. So this multilateralism is also a symbol of this conference, and I think that's very important. We need more of this. At the same time, when I speak, when I point out this, I see the huge challenge in front of us, because the people outside here of the conference, they don't know what is the discussion here. In Germany, the mainstream people, they don't know about Agenda 2030. They know about the Agenda 2010, and many of them, they think, oh, that's not the best way for the future, for the mainstreaming. So how to translate what is here in our mind, what is our action, what is our challenge, to bring even to the people in Germany. We heard many positive phrases on Germany in this morning, but really we also only cook with water, and here many things have many deficits, and so much has to be done. But to bring it really to the people, to bring up this tremendous word inclusiveness also in this regard, I think there much has to be done, and that is one field for action.
Thank you very much. That was a great set of reflections to kick us off. And just picking up on those last points, we've had discussions about transformation in energy systems, in financial systems, even in politics. I think there's also an interesting question hanging over the discussion about the role of social action in that, the role of communities and the role of social mobilization and the role of changes in values within that. But many thanks to all of you for those opening reflections. And before moving to Melinda and the audience, I would like also to ask some questions about Page, about the Partnership for Action on Green Economy, particularly to our two ministerial panelists. Minister Lee, what do you see as the role of Page in pushing this agenda forward?
Thank you. Korea has been one of the funding partners of Page since 2013, after Korea announced plans to expand the Green ODA at Rio+20. And then I am very happy to observe the expansion of the partnership with now five UN agencies, 8 funding partners and 11 acting partners. Regarding the question I was asked, I believe the Page projects contribute to a developing countries' drive towards green economy in the 3 following perspectives. First, the projects facilitate discussions on green economy. Second, they promote exchanges of experiences. And the third, they make it possible to learn partnership in implementing green economy. Let me elaborate a little more. First, it is my view that Page projects served as a precious opportunity to trigger the initial discussion on participating countries transition into green economy. If I may take one specific example, Mongolia was the first beneficiary of these projects. From the first discussions through PAGE, Mongolia established the National Green Development Policy in 2014 and laid out the action plan to implement this policy in 2016. I think it should be noted that reaching a social consensus is very important in the transition from brown economy to green. In this regard, supports are also provided by PAGE projects for the development of countries' green policies and indicators. Second, exchanges of experiences. While half of the PAGE projects were proceeded for the last 4 years, 11 countries participated with many progresses. Mongolia had meaningful changes in national policy framework, as I said. Peru established plans to promote youth employment in green industry. Senegal was provided with support for implementing its initial action plan. If I may share Korea's experience, we had a hard time setting the right direction for green growth in initial stage, as it was difficult to find useful examples for us. However, since we have successful PAGE projects now, beneficiaries or acting partners will be able to reduce their trials and errors. And the third, learning partnership in implementing green economy. Developing countries' efforts alone would not be enough to bring them green economy. Diverse actors' engagement, however, will enable us to learn partnership from each other, which I believe will eventually help achieve sustainable green economy. That's my reflection. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Minister Lee. Minister Skog, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to add on the role of PAGE, both in relation to Sweden and to the developing world as well?
Yes. One basic thing is worth reminding is that we live in a common global economy, and therefore no part of the world can solve the sustainability issues on itself. And I think the PAGE partnership can be one partnership that can change the dynamic between the north and south, or whatever you want to call it, the different partners that are taking different roles in this global economy, and making us work together. Sharing knowledge, of course, and then the mutual sharing knowledge I would like to stress in that. For the example of Sweden, it's very, very clear to us. We're often being pointed out. For example, we're pointing out as the country in the world that is we're on the top on implementing the SDGs. But we also, if you look at it into another from another point of view, looking on our consumption, we are on the top 5 on ecological footprint if you count our consumption. Everything counted in the products that we import, specifically from Asia. And looking that way, we need to learn so much, and we need to connect with those countries that have that production so much to find our sustainable solutions. So I think bringing about in partnership is crucial to every country or every partner in this work. And I do think that the partnership such as PAGE can really play a role that in sharing of knowledge and creating the transparency needed to grasp the situation as a whole. Because we play different roles, but we do this together. We know both, of course, it's very clear on the environmental side, we have the same climate, but we also live in the same economy to a large extent. And bringing that up in an informed way with partners from the private side and also from research, I think is really, really important, breaking really big issues down to doable policy.
Thank you very much. It's great to have those reflections both on what page is achieving now and also on its potential for the future. We're now going to move to the floor, and the objective at this point is to really gather feedback, find out the things you've been discussing, particularly in the side panels on the four themes: green investment, sustainable lifestyle, inclusive growth, and policy making. And I'll hand over to my co-moderator, Melinda, at this point.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you also to the panel. So I'd like to do it like this. I will call out the names of the sessions because, as you know, we had a set of sessions in the morning, another one in the afternoon, but they were a little bit different. They had slightly different focal points. So I'm going to call out the name of a session and then ask somebody from that session to please share with us what they saw as a really key message there. And if somebody else wants to add as well, then by all means do. But I'm going to start, first of all, with policy in practice. So who attended policy in practice in the morning session? Policy in practice. Okay, gosh, they're all clustered here. How convenient. Would you like to say a word about what you thought was a key message there?
The key message, in my opinion, was the discussion about leadership and responsibility, and what is necessary to focus on that, and what should be done to train leaders, either political or business leaders.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to ask everybody to briefly say who they are, but I'll do that for you. This is the Federal Ambassador for Sustainability from Germany, Mr. Martin Wittau. Did I get that right? Oh, well, it's written on your badge. Okay, thank you very much. How about you? You attended the morning session as well, Policy and Practice? Great.
Well, actually, I was one of the panelists. And
well, not everyone was there, so.
we introduced the subject of leadership by asking that, look, in the ultimate analysis, if you are a leader, you are responsible not only for what you do, but also for what you don't do. And that is an issue which responsible leaders must comprehend. And the second issue we discussed and highlighted was that in the ultimate analysis, you can have either something in your head, something in your hand, or something in your heart. You can have knowledge in your head, you can have wealth in your hand, or you can have awareness in your heart. And awareness is about not only your view of 360 degrees which you take from your seat, but also a 360 view additionally to be taken from the perspective of those who may be impacted by your decision. So good leadership is 720 view. That is awareness, that is responsible leadership. And in that context, I think the concept which Pope Paul once said was that life is more about being more rather than having more. That's why we are called human beings, not human havings. And I think that is the link which we need to bring in the vacuum of leadership we have today. If people are only after sustainability of their power as a leader, then it won't work. But if they are after sustaining the lifestyles of and the livelihoods of those they lead, we will have not only a sustainable world, but progressively sustainable world. Thank you.
Thank you. And you are Mr. Ravi Chowdhury, but I can't read the rest of your badge. Thank you very much. And again, there was a hand here as well. Somebody? Yes, please.
What I would say, okay, my name is Elie Defriend, and I represent Prémanet, which is an international association, and we have a consulting company in sustainability. And the one thing I really remembered was that, unfortunately, our panelists were unable to come up with concrete examples of leadership. That was what the moderator asked. Can we have concrete examples of leadership in the area of policy making. I think Ravi made some good ideas about what leadership is, and it was an inspiring session. But I think this is one of our challenges, is when you get asked to put your finger on where has it succeeded. There was mention of Thailand, and I think Thailand has done some good work. But it's a challenge. And I think that's a good point that we really must remember, is when people get put on the spot, we need to be able to come up with concrete cases of where it's worked.
Well, sense of best practices. That might be a question we could throw back to the panel in just a moment. Let me ask about the afternoon session, policy and practice. Who attended in the afternoon? You're being pointed out. Do you wish to say something? Tell us who you are also.
Mutpala Company from representing National Cleaner Production Center Sri Lanka. I was actually a panelist there. It was about how education can bring up to minimize the skill gap. So basically, what I saw is that education for sustainability is a need, and the problem of skill, importance of having skilled people was a universal problem. So basically the idea came up as integration of education to curricula and having partnerships. So from the morning it was said that having partnerships are important, and for this, at this session also, like what we came up is that having partnerships is essential to overcome this gap.
Thank you very much. Anybody else from the afternoon session of policy and practice want to weigh in with a contribution? Sorry. Could you, okay, can you, all right, good. It's going to take me a while to get there. Will you put your hand up again so I can find you? Thanks.
Thanks, Angus Mackay. I was just trying to move you to this side of the room, actually. That was the main purpose. UN Institute for Training and Research. Yeah, we had a very engaging discussion on education and training and skills development, because very often this issue is not brought up or made explicit. It's assumed that our education systems, both general education and continuing education, will do the job. They won't. We had an exchange bringing experience from many countries on the issue of supply and demand for skills in the green economy, and many very concrete examples. One from South Africa, where it was known, for example, 10 years ago, that the public sector would need at least 300 environmental engineers to support its investment programs. That was known 10 years ago, that they would need at least that number today, and they haven't been able to deliver it. And why is that? And how can we unpack that issue? There were a number of solutions. One of the solutions was to do the analysis better and project that more effectively into the policy discussions. But also think, as Abdoulaye said, think more about developing partnerships, particularly with national training institutions and educational institutions. And I'll leave you with one number. In Nigeria, we learnt about one college that is actually generating 10,000 graduates every year. Now, what proportion of those 10,000 know anything about the green economy? The implication was very, very few. What would it take to turn that around? Probably not an awful lot, but absolutely fundamental to the future growth of the Nigerian economy. So this was a flavor of some of the issues that we discussed. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Who attended green investment, either in the morning or in the afternoon? Well, let's start out with morning. Who attended green investment? Good. Thank you. Here I am.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Lars Andreas Lund, and I'm State Secretary of Climate and Environment in Norway. And I was chairing this morning's session about green investment, finance, fiscal policy, and leveraging domestic resources. And we were discussing the importance of fiscal policy in addressing climate change and also other environmental challenges, saying that fiscal policy is very important, especially putting a price on carbon emissions and other environmental damages to attract finance and to make, to make people more invest in environmental friendly products and so on, to use the market mechanism. But of course in some areas like nature protection, biodiversity and so on, you also need to complement with legal matters such as regulations. But as we also said, I mean, transformation, a green transformation also has its costs. We also have to stop subsidizing fossil fuels, and that is actually a negative price on pollution. So I mean, we really have to stop fossil fuels. But we also know that this transformation also has its costs for people being affected. So it's essential to combine the transformation with taking care of people who are affected, like coal miners losing their job, or people in unsustainable forestry in tropical forest countries and so on. So you also need to have training to have the really, so that the transformation is not stopped by political opposition or people losing their livelihood. So we have to combine it with taking care of the people who are affected by economic transformation and maybe in the short run at least experience disadvantages.
Thanks very much. What about green investment in the afternoon? Who attended green investment in the afternoon? Okay.
Mao Aim is Executive Director of the African Center for Green Economy based in Cape Town. I attended the afternoon session, and for me the key thing that came out of that session was the idea of how do we make developing countries much more competitive. We know that there's very little trade that's actually happening within the developing countries. 90% of the trade between Africa and the rest is with the rest of the world, as opposed to within African countries. So how do we actually make sure that trade works very well among African countries, but at the same time we able to add value to African products so that we can be able to meet the global trade standards. So an idea of really how do we make developing countries add value to their products. For me, that was a key issue that came out around capacity building and really improving the trade relations with the rest of the world. Thank you.
Anybody else have a very important message on green investment that they took away from either morning or afternoon? Okay, let's see how we get you a microphone. I'll come around. Next time I'm going to wear my running shoes for this.
Thank you very much. We also reached at a point of agreeing that some of the problems of our world is materialization of our economy. So we merged at an agreement that use of technology and digital structures or infrastructures could be very important in trying to kind of limit the amount of material we need to run our economies, to enhance education, and of course, to do capacity building. So that was also very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will move on now to sustainable lifestyles. Morning. Who went to sustainable lifestyles in the morning? Okay, way over there. One sec. Put your hand up again, please. Thanks. You planned this, right?
Meeting you halfway. So I'm Jeremy Waits, Secretary General of the European Environmental Bureau, and I was in that session. And in terms of sort of takeaways, things that stuck in my mind, there was a remark by the director of the Center for Environmental Education in India. Sorry, I don't have your name on the tip of my tongue. And it was basically, he was basically saying, well, in India, in our tradition, we are picking mangoes in a certain season. And I think he said when it starts to rain, we know that that's the time to stop eating mangoes. Or maybe it was when it stops raining. I can't remember. Apologies for that too. But I think that was an important message about the issue of how our cultural assumptions are changing and the issues of individual choice are important. The second point, if I can steal a second point, is a kind of a complementary point that was made by the moderator, Karolina Skog, Minister of Environment from Sweden, when she made the point that actually, yeah, individual choice is important, but let's not use this, I'm putting this in my words, not hers, let's not use this to exonerate governments from the unique and specific responsibility they have to set the regulatory framework within which individual choices are made. And if I can be even more bold and add a third point, I think we need to make the same point about the business sector as well, who also make decisions which affect the framework within which individuals make choice, whether it's in issues of advertising or what. So those are my takeaways. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who went to Sustainable Lifestyles in the afternoon? Sustainable Lifestyles. Okay. Somebody else got there before me. Do tell us who you are, please.
Hi, my name is Natasha Koyman. I'm one of the panelists, but I think it's a shame if it isn't mentioned what happened in the afternoon session. It was about lifestyle and food, and the very important role that food plays in lifestyles. And actually, I think it's also a subject, food, that aligns to all things that are discussed here too. It's about the hunger in the world, the 800 million people that are hungry, and the 1.4 million or billion that are obese or overweight. So we started out with an introduction of Alexander Müller about all the brutal facts that align with our food system, our current food system, which is not sustainable at all. And we had an intervention of Eda Fernandez from Mexico, who also tried to explain the difficulty of the different problems we're facing in the Western countries versus the developing countries and the emerging markets. And then I was the innovative intervention with a focus on catering and how that could be kind of a leverage to more sustainable food systems and lifestyles through influencing the offering in the channels, and by that make sure that people get influenced indirectly and as a starting point for new habits, more healthy habits, and more sustainable eating patterns.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to contribute on the subject of sustainable lifestyles, morning or afternoon? Okay.
Good afternoon. I think one of the most important messages that came out from the afternoon session is a point made by Natasha. She said that sustainable doesn't mean more expensive, and that is an important message that we need to be able to translate to everyone. So it was a message that came from the morning to the afternoon about translating the message, making sure that every sector of the society understands what it is the goals that we're trying to achieve. So we all should speak the same language.
Thanks, and I have another input here.
Thank you. My name is Sarwat Chaudhry. I work at the UN Development Program. For the morning sustainable livelihood session, couple of takeaway for me is that inspiring people to consider sustainable lifestyles as desirable as well as sustainable. So both in the user end, but also on the business end. And one really good example of successful business model was from Morocco, Amal Women's Training Center and Moroccan restaurant, which is working with vulnerable women, providing them the business skills to run restaurants, but also providing them with life skills to be independent. So this was a really good example to see.
Thank you. Got another contribution here. If you would, very brief, we need to move on to number 4. Thanks.
Thank you. Gabrielle Kohler, Women Engaged for Common Future. I thought a very important point regarding governance was Minister Skog's point about changing value-added taxes. So in the case of Sweden, they've reduced the value-added tax on repair to make it more affordable to get something repaired rather than buying a new item.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. Last topic was inclusive growth. So who attended inclusive growth in the morning and would like to say a word? Okay.
Thank you. I'm Daniel Klingenfeld, head of the director's staff at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. Yeah, in the morning session on inclusive growth, we looked at different metrics beyond GDP to measure a nation's wealth and the development of wealth over time. And it's quite a striking finding that if you include other metrics like stocks, for example, also of natural capital, that despite the simple measure of positive economic growth over the past decades, if you have a more broad picture on the development of different indicators, actually wealth has gone down in a couple of countries because actually societies have been drawing, for example, on their natural capital to sustain an apparent growth of the economic system. So what is needed actually is a much broader metric to also orientate decision-making for policymakers, and the notion of human capital, education, natural capital is very important. On that last point, on the natural capital, interestingly, what also I found very interesting is that most of the times also the fossil resources are included in the natural capital of nations. And there I, for example, ask the question, how do we value this type of natural capital? And indeed, it's very sensitive to future climate policies, for example. So one should be aware that what is considered today an asset, for example, the oil sands in Canada, in this accounting perspective, may actually become a liability in the future if we manage to implement carbon pricing. So this is quite important, I guess, for thinking about the wealth of nations in a sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Inclusive growth, morning or afternoon? Okay, good, thanks.
Yeah, hello, my name is André Lindner from the Technische University of Dresden, and we are hosting an environmental management course for developing countries. And what was stuck in my head from this session was sorry, I forgot the name, the lady from South Africa, saying first that there is migration, which was one of the major issues in the session, also nationally or in Africa, which is a problem not only outside of Africa. And she reminded us that a lot of these problems are built on off the shoulder of a giant, like the wealth of the developed world was built in part on Africa, and we should be aware of that. And also that maybe conservative economic patterns, whether they are green or not, will not adequately tackle the problems of migrations and other issues. So this was my main takeaway. And also, I will have a look into the eco-villages in Burkina Faso. This sounded very interesting, too.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else want to add something on inclusive growth, either morning or afternoon? Sure.
Thank you very much. My name is Cecilia. And thank you very much for the contributions. They were very useful. But I think as we speak about business and value chains and inclusive growth, I think we also need to talk about what we have said today, but within context. Because if we say we want to communicate, what are we communicating? Are we going to communicate in a way that is going to make people resist? Or are we going to communicate in a way that is going to enhance acceptance? And then again, in terms of capacity building, what kind of capacity building are we talking about? Workshops? I don't think so. Yeah, such things, specifics. And then in terms of business, the business community, the private sector, which is very important in driving this agenda, maybe it would be useful to look at the realities of the impacts of degradation of the environment and climate change. If, in our case, the infrastructure is wiped out as a result of flooding or whatever other instance in various parts of the world, what does that mean for value chains? The raw materials, will they get to the business community? In some cases, maybe not. They may be more expensive. And what about the goods and services that are supposed to be delivered? Who are they going to be delivered to? As in terms of impacts, it's going to translate into economic terms that maybe it's a question for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I think that's a good input to end on because it includes a lot of questions that we can throw back to the panelists. So we had that other question as well regarding leadership and whether the panel can think of good concrete examples. You had a lot of time to do so, so maybe I'll hand that back now to you, Andrew, and to the panelists for comments on whatever they care to comment on. Thank you very much, and especially to the audience for those really very brief and very input and very intriguing and interesting responses. So many thanks to you.
Yes, many thanks indeed. A fascinating and very rich and broad set of inputs there. So I would like, I mean, the panelists can to a degree pick and choose from amongst that, I think, what they address. But as Melinda was indicating, I would like to repeat the challenge from the audience about examples of outstanding responsible leadership for sustainable development, if any of the panelists would like to offer a concrete example. Yes, Karolina.
I'm afraid, though, it's not a new one, but I do think that Germany, in the example of energy vendor, is the fantastic example of a bold and strong governmental action and connected with the plan. You remember Professor Sachs asked for the plan. And that's why I think I point to Germany, that they took the decision and they seem to have a plan to implement it. And those two together makes bold and strong and sustainable leadership to me. And it was not an easy decision. Many from the private sector, they were suing, there were all kind of dynamic around it, but they've been standing put and they seem to implement, and I'm really, really impressed.
Thank you very much. So vision plus plan plus determination. Klaus.
Yeah, 2 points. One is German presidency on G20 just now. And I think in the global context, the G20 have to take the lead now in implementing New York and the Paris Agreement. That is the reason why they should debate and negotiate and move forward. And I would say, because we have some problems in front of us with the G20, if one country is not willing to move, perhaps the other 19 or the 18 plus the EU really move forward nevertheless. Perhaps that is a new momentum also for G20 in this year. And I'm free enough as an NGO representative to bring up this proposal. But I think it's necessary in this very moment to move like this. Many debates are going around in the different engagement groups, and so wonderful ideas, and we shouldn't stop to bring up more dynamics. Another point is, which wasn't mentioned up to now, we have many leaders in the world, in the cities and in the communities. Much is happening there, also in the United States. Much is happening there in the stage of municipalities and so on. And that is helpful also for the leaders of state to move forward. And this push and pull movement should be used in a better way, I think. And the last point is that we all must try to be ready also for conflicts, because phase out coal is not free of conflicts, but we should learn together how to do it in a consensual way, and perhaps PAGE can be also a platform to learn from each other, to speak about how are you doing this, how are you doing this. South Africa has a problem with coal and some others too, and Germany has a problem. So we can do it in a more or less participative way, and we should learn. And the last point is I want to make is this food question. We need not only Energiewende, energy transition, we also need food transition, we need mobility transition. So there are huge, tremendous work in front of us, and we need civil society, we need cities and communities for this.
Right, thanks very much, and thanks indeed for the reminder that many of these things are not easy and that social action will be essential to create the consensus to move forward in these areas. That first policy area of policy and practice, that first discussion area, and in the spirit of finding concrete actions, things we can do that will make things better. Would any of the other panelists like to come in at this point? Please, Frank.
Yes, I think we had a few more examples in our session, but we can give other ones as well. I think particularly we talked about just now cities and municipal governments being able to take positive action. There's also governments that recognize that in addition to the capital that often get a lot of attention, there should really be secondary cities that are green cities. And from Ethiopia to Rwanda to Cambodia, there's developing countries that really would like to try green secondary cities as a solution to the, if you like, getting one massive city that can't service the people there. And then there are, in Senegal as well, that's another country that does the same thing, practical solutions of can we manage waste to energy, can we provide sustainable sanitation, can we provide sustainable, if you like, services in general to particularly the lower income sides of towns. I think that's a good area where there are quite a few interesting solutions, interesting examples of leadership from developing countries.
Thank you very much indeed, Frank. Deputy Minister Lee, did you want to come in at this point?
Yeah, let me talk about something, our leadership on green growth or green economy using Korea's case. As some of you are aware that we started the green growth policy since 2008 with the former President Lee Myung-bak, and it's almost 10 years past. Since then, I think we have experienced a couple of progress in terms of legislation and the policy framework, governance structure, and so on. For example, we established the Committee on Green Growth under President as a consultative body to promote inter-ministerial consultation and cooperation, and also gathering all the perspectives from various stakeholders. And I think that is one good example to have a nice governance in achieving the green growth. And in terms of legislation, we legislated the Basic Act on low carbon and green growth in 2009, and that still function as the basic fundamentals in pursuing the green growth in Korea. The other example I can show you is that, let's see, the emission trading scheme, that is the famous emission trading scheme in European Union. We introduced in 2015, 2 years ago, and we are still in initial stage in managing the new scheme. And there's still some controversy, some challenge from the business sector. And we are dealing with that issue. But I think that can be one concrete the case in Korea and take this green growth policy seriously. One point I would like to mention is that how can we continue the green growth policy or green economy policy in the long run? So you see, it is usually difficult to see tangible outcomes in a short-term period in the process of transition into green economy. So my idea is to convince people and other stakeholders of the effects of green policies is to show successful stories, successful policy cases, even the small ones, as often as possible. In this sense, sometimes we can get some ideas, some stories from other countries. So I think international cooperation, getting some knowledge sharing is important in this sense.
Thank you very much indeed. Career is indeed such a rich experience. Thank you very much indeed for sharing some of those lessons. Let's move now, in the interest of time, through the other areas of discussion. Would anyone like to pick up some concrete forward actions, practical suggestions in the area of green investment? Thank you very much.
Vous allez peut-être me permettre de faire une petite digression pour ajouter quelques grains de sel sur le débat. Alors, ce que je voudrais dire, c'est que pour nombre de nos pays, ce concept d'économie verte est quand même assez nouveau. Et donc, l'heure est beaucoup plus à la réflexion. Nous sommes en train de réfléchir sur l'essentiel des thématiques qui ont été évoquées sur la croissance inclusive, sur les politiques, sur les migrations. L'heure est beaucoup plus à la réflexion. Mais bon, naturellement, nous ne pouvons pas passer notre temps à réfléchir. D'où la pertinence de la question qui est posée lors de cette session. Comment peut-on passer de la réflexion à l'action? Or, pour cela, nous pensons que non seulement il nous faut des références très solides, il nous faut des modèles bien bâtis, et fort malheureusement, même si certains pays aujourd'hui s'érigent en modèle, ils le font très modestement, parce qu'on est modèle dans un domaine et pas dans un autre. Et la question de l'économie verte me semble très complexe et très diversifiée, de sorte qu'il sera très difficile de trouver un modèle dans chacun des domaines. Voilà ce que je voudrais ajouter.
Thank you very much indeed. On the green investment area, Minister Skog, is there any useful experience to share from Sweden on that?
Yeah, one point is, of course, saying that the green bonds tends to spread. We have several municipalities engaging in green bonds, and the outcomes seem to be very, very positive. Specifically, when you connect the green bonds to a very isolated geographic area and connect it to urban development, it is a really new way of finding money to transformative actions and finding bolder money for investments that are on the pilot scales and really new. And it seems to be working really well. And we see it spreading. And we try to help them from the government side as well in terms of auditing and spreading the examples from municipality to municipality, but also internationally. But also one comment was made here on the new measuring the economic growth in a new way. And there it's not an example yet, but we will present a budget from our government in 2 weeks. And it will, for the first time, firstly have an environmental chapter, a freestanding environmental chapter in the budget, but also we will now present for the first time a broader measurement of our economic growth. We have added, indicated, for example, on social development to the economic numbers. And this is a completely new work on our side, and of course we've been learning a lot from the international example. But it is a way of broadening the debate on economic growth and prosperity, and we do hope that it will help in creating and finding transformative actions ahead.
Fantastic. I mean, that's an area that's a long debate with maybe relatively few examples, certainly at the country level, of pragmatic and practical ways forward. So we'll all look forward to seeing that. Thank you very much, Frank.
Can I, Andrew? While there are good examples, I think in the area of Green Invest, what we see working with our member countries, that there is, in fact, a very big disconnect. On the one hand, there are a lot of people in the finance area that say there is lots of money, but there are no good projects. And people with projects say, how can we get access to finance? It's extremely difficult to get access to finance. People often think, okay, there's the $100 billion, right, for climate finance, Green Climate Fund. So let's get accredited for the Green Climate Fund. If you try to submit your accreditation papers today, chances are you might get accredited in 2020 or so. I mean, those are very difficult processes. We had a few months ago a big discussion on that with lots of people where they said, okay, if we evaluate the clean development mechanism, the conclusion was most developing countries had a very hard time getting access to that money because it was so difficult to gain access. The transaction costs are very high, the paperwork is very complicated. So we believe that the bottleneck in green investment in many cases is the capacity of governments to develop bankable projects, to come up with projects that attract international concessional climate finance, can be combined with national government finance, and then particularly, as we'd like to say now, crowd in private investment, can combine with private investment. So building capacity in many countries to do that better is one way of overcoming that bottleneck. And another one that we see is coming up with what we call national finance vehicles, funds within the country that can actually do, in a way, the retail. You don't have to all get accredited for the Green Climate Fund. If there's one bank in the country that can do that, and then make that available through windows where you can much smaller amounts of money to private companies or to NGOs or to cities, that we think is a key area for further development that many of our governments are interested in as well.
Yeah, and there was a fascinating discussion in the plenary on that, on seeing the financial system in a holistic way and the ways in which maybe some of those oppositions could be overcome by that. In the interest of time, I'm now going to move forward. We could continue any of these discussions for a very long time, but move forward to the sustainable lifestyles issue. And is there anything you'd like to pick up in terms of that discussion? Klaus, I'll pick on you to start.
Yes, the lifestyle question is very much combined also with the political will of the leaders, because it's not a private solution to change the lifestyle alone. You can try, but you all know the way up is very difficult if there is not the help, the support from the political side. And when I can mention perhaps again the Paris Agreement, that was a big signal for the investors, for the financial markets, that they have to change. And also this is necessary for lifestyles in the world and for the different lifestyles we have. And that's important that we not have all the Coca-Cola lifestyle very homogeneous. We need a very differentiated variety of lifestyles, of course, but never again this climate offensive way as we do it and the resource offensive as we do it. There must be big changes, but we need the political will for this. And I think from the NGO side, we will do what we can to bring this forward. We need our space to do it. We had the discussion on shrinking spaces today. That it's very important for political leaders to have this in mind. Without civil society, you can't bring up the solutions we need. And that can be done together with the business side. Many people in Germany who are now part of the renewable industry had been civil society protesters 20 or 30 years before. So there is a connection between changes and new business cases in front of us. So I think this is the important point to bring the ball back to the political arena.
Thank you very much. And I mean, that point about the responsibility of governments was also stressed from the floor, as also the very interesting example of lowering VAT on repair from Sweden, which I'm sure is something many other countries could look at as well. Let's move on to the final area now, which was inclusive growth. Can I start with a question, which is, to what extent do people on the panel feel that the issue of inequality of rising inequality can be a leading edge for sustainable development as a whole, bearing in mind the mantra of the SDGs around leaving no one behind? To what extent can this be the leading edge of discussions around sustainability? I've reduced the panel to silence with that.
It must, the growing inequality in the world, within our societies and within, within our nations and within the global, on the global scope, must be on the edge, and I think must be, I think, what is pushing us forward, because the dynamics that we see in the political world is completely related to that issue, and it's not, I would also argue, being only about wealth. It's also about inclusion, difference in education and educational gaps and informational gaps coming onto that, and big groups in our society, also in the rich world, being feeling to be left behind. Maybe not being left behind, but having the, they feel that they are left behind, and that is very real in their lives, and addressing the point of the inequality is growing in the world. We can never go around that. We cannot pretend it's not happening. And that is also adding to the complexity that was really clear here today, that both Mr. Solheim and Professor Sachs is right. They're describing this, the same world, but they're using black and white, because describing it completely different, but both of them are right. And wealth is growing, but inequality is also growing, and development is happening, and people, big groups, are left behind on a global scale, but also on the local scales. We have big groups of people, specifically men, in Sweden, one of the richest countries in the world, but they feel left behind, and they are protesting, and they don't care much about the SDGs, I would say. Today, but we must include them in the work.
Thank you very much indeed. And on that eloquent note, I think we're pretty much out of time, so we could have continued, I'm sure, on any of those topics for considerably longer. Just a final word, which I think came from one of the last contributions from the floor, which is this sense that page itself can be a forum for mutual learning about leadership in sustainable development. And I hope that's something we can take forward into tomorrow's discussions. Melinda.
Thank you very, very much to the whole panel and also to Andrew Norton. Let's give them a warm round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. And we will indeed talk about Paige's contribution in our final panel, for example, tomorrow at the close of the conference. I would also like to say thank you not only to all of the speakers, but also to all of you in the audience for your attention and your contributions during this very intensive day. And also, can we please applaud for our translators who have been on this beautiful day in those little boxes all day. Thank you so much to all of you for your very, very hard work. This does bring our formal conference activities for day one to a close, but as you know, there is a very special program awaiting you this evening, and let me just briefly give you a little bit of information about that. Our host, the Federal Ministry for the Environment, looks forward to welcoming you in a very unusual venue here in Berlin, really very special. It is Berlin's Museum of Natural History, and buses will depart from the hotel to take you to the museum starting at 6:45 p.m. downstairs at the front entrance. And please be sure to catch one of those buses no later than 7:10 p.m. because that is when the last one will leave and you don't want to miss that transport opportunity. Do take your badges with you. You will need them to get into the museum when you arrive. And please give your translation devices back at the table in the back of the room. If you think about it, that would be very kind. Certainly, please don't take them with you. And finally, I look forward to seeing everybody back here at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. We will begin with a keynote from a company, a global logistics company that has dedicated its efforts to going green. So we'll hear more tomorrow morning. I wish everybody a wonderful evening. Enjoy yourselves. Guten Appetit. See you tomorrow. Thanks again.